Hey everyone, it's Sleepy Reader, aka Damien. This is my comic book countdown. I have 12 comic books that I picked up this past Wednesday, New Comic Book Day, that I finally finished reading, and I'm going to give you my really super subjective ranking of them, starting with number 12 and going down to my number 1 book. And I could easily be called Cranky Reader this week. Maybe it's that I had a bad allergic reaction earlier in the week and had a lot of problems from that. It's still a mystery as to what the allergy came from. Hopefully not this kombucha, as I'm about to drink some. But and then just today we're having smoke pouring into my neighborhood, into Portland, from forest fires. I'm not quite sure where all the forest fires are, and weird high winds gusting through the city. So I was originally going to shoot this outside, but it was too unpleasant to sit outside. And now it feels like the smoke is starting to come into our house a little bit. So I've got like a bad taste in my mouth. So maybe that's why I'm Cranky Reader. Or maybe another thought, as I was reading these, I thought, and I know that some of these comics that I was not thinking that highly of are actually getting a lot of praise. And I was thinking, maybe I've hit that point where I'm too old, where I'm too much of an old time reader. Although I have, had very high opinions of a lot of modern comics of the past 20 years, so to speak. But maybe I've hit some point where they're going in a way. I don't know. But it's just 1 week. It seems like in one comic I'd have complaints with the artist, another comic complaints with the writer, other times the colorist seemed to be ruining the comic for me. But there was still some stuff that I enjoyed quite a lot here. So let's dive into it. In at number 12, sadly, is Wonder Woman, number 761, still written by Mariko Tamaki, but with a new artist on here. Does she have a co-writer? I'm thinking. No, the penciler is Carlo Barberi. It was, for the first 2 issues, it was the wonderful art of Mikhail Janin. And this is a big step down and has much more of a... I mean, obviously, Carlo Barberi is a far better artist than I'll ever be. But compared to Mikhail Janin, it feels like a rushed comic with a lot less effort and detail and just panache to it. But the real flaw to me seems to be this Mariko Tamaki's scripting is just not very stellar. It's just sort of there. It's an okay superhero story of a sort, but it doesn't feel like a whole lot of effort's gone into it either. I don't feel like there's any, often where in the best of circumstances you get a new writer on Wonder Woman and they've got this vision and something they're going for. But there's nothing, no sign of that here to me anyway. I'm missing it. But certainly the art did not help. So yeah, I have to rank this lowest. I hate this kind of cover. I know some people love this kind of cover. I really wanted the A cover, but my shop didn't have any A covers left when I arrived to pick it up. I think I went Thursday. I did go on Wednesday this week, but I arrived kind of later in the day, and I guess I didn't get a lot of copies of Wonder Woman, or maybe it's still selling out a bit. But and then I found out that for some reason my shop has me down wanting the variant cover, the cardstock cover that costs $1 more. I don't like these covers. I like to have the trade dress, and I like to have the A cover. But anyway, just complaining. In at number 11 is the final issue of King of Nowhere. And maybe this one suffered from me wanting too much from Maxwell Prince, the writer of Ice Cream Man. But I really did not care very much by the end of this 5-issue story. There was a lot of fighting, which I don't think is the strong point of artist Tyler Jenkins. I think one of the big problems with this is, while I think Tyler Jenkins is a really cool artist, I don't think he was right for the story. And I think between him and the writer, maybe it not turning out to be one of his best ideas, something just did not gel here. And so we end with kind of a bunch of people fighting and some people getting killed, and the story wraps up. And we try to have kind of an ironic ending where the story kind of ends where it began a little bit. But it didn't click with me. I mean, actually, look at that. That's really cool art. There's really cool. I think Jenkins does his own color, if I'm not mistaken. No, it's colored by Hillary Jenkins. Perhaps that's his wife. It looks, I don't know. I think it's watercolor, although maybe it's just digital coloring made to look like watercolor. The art looks really good. It just doesn't mesh a whole lot with the story. It doesn't bring the story to the kind of life maybe it needed. So, and here's my biggest disappointment of the week, because this was the book I was looking forward to the most, perhaps all month. But in at number 10 was We Only Find Them When We're Dead, for me. I think for some people this was their pick of the week. And I'd say half of my problem with this was the art and the color, particularly the color choices. So the art just was flat on the page for me. I know it's almost dimensional kind of color, but the color didn't bring the important elements of the story out. It was hard for my eye to find its place in every panel. And I looked on my iPad on Comixology. They show the first 3 pages. You can preview the first 3 pages, and it looked quite a bit better on the digital screen. But I was reading this physically, and I had to go with what was there. And I constantly was not visually finding my place on the page. And a lot of it was the coloring. Some of it was maybe the line art, but I think mostly it was the coloring. There's your big, amazing reveal of one of these dead gods floating in space. And it looks like a very sort of generic, armored anime kind of figure floating in space. The opportunity for how would you visualize a dead god floating in space? And that's what we come up with. I was just underwhelmed. And also this double page spread where I can't really make out very much, I guess because of the coloring. I think it was mostly colored by Simone DeMeo, who was the line artist, with color assists by someone else. I assume they did the flat colors or the initial pass on the coloring. It looks really cool. I mean, they're appealing. The colors in and of themselves are appealing, but they don't, for me, work with me with the story. Now, some of the flaws were in the storytelling too, in the writing of it. How would this be so this is written by Al Ewing, who's doing my favorite Marvel comic, The Immortal Hulk. So that's why I had such high expectations. Plus, I love this idea of dead gods floating in space, and then someone goes on a quest for a living god. It's a fantastic, fun, over-the-top, pulpy sci-fi idea. But the introduction of the characters and the explanation of the situation and all of that were very, lacked impact. And at the end of and there were maybe partially because of my confusion from the art, there was events going on where there's some kind of, higher corporate authority or government authority that is not letting the freelance people do their work anymore, and we see spaceship get destroyed because of that. And at the end, the characters decide, the lead character decides that he is going to go find a living god instead of a dead one. But how he comes to that decision or anything, for me, there was nothing here that I could follow the thinking and the progress of the characters. It felt like it was just notes towards a story rather than a full story. But I was so looking forward to this when I read about it in previews 2 months ago. That's a cool looking page, but it just doesn't communicate much. So yeah. Now, it strikes me that there was another book a couple of weeks ago from Boom. This is a Boom book that was written by Tom Taylor and had art that was sort of like this, that had that feeling of being stills from an anime, possibly. And it was, what was it called? 7 Secrets or 6 Secrets. And a lot of people loved it, and I didn't like it that much. The art there was easier to interpret, but there was something similar in this kind of style of art, which is where I'm thinking maybe I'm just too old, and maybe this is a style of art that's passing me by, that I just can't keep up with the times. And maybe that's the case. I don't know. That's kind of a cool page there, but even there you can see how background and foreground kind of all blend together. So that was in at number 10 out of 12. At least I had more fun reading it just because I liked the basic concept of it than the 2 that I ranked before it. And expectations are a lot. So I also had some expectations for Hellblazer Rise and Fall. Unfortunately, I've heard great things about the current Hellblazer regular Black Label series that's about to be canceled. So I mean to swing back and read it. Too late, of course, to keep it from being canceled. But in the meantime, I thought, well, I can jump on this fancy, oversized 3-issue thing by hot writer Tom Taylor and art by Derek Robertson, who was I think he was the really great artist on Warren Ellis's famous book Transmetropolitan. But his style has changed a lot, and I really did not like the coloring in this book. The story was an okay Hellblazer story, but it didn't blow me away. It seemed to kind of plod along, and I didn't really get where we're going. Like, it hasn't given me a super compelling reason to keep reading. There were points in which I enjoyed the art. Other points where it didn't live up to my expectations from the artist Derek Robertson, and I definitely just did not. The coloring, at least on the page, again, maybe digitally it would have been different, just did not work for me. By Diego Rodriguez. So there's these people falling from the sky with wings on, and it's kind of, that part's kind of interesting. I guess, you're supposed to accept that everything in Hellblazer takes place with people getting drunk and then solving the mysteries or something, but somehow it just felt kind of rote to me on that. But I was intrigued near the end of the story, so if I don't think this is on my pull list, so if I'm having a slow week or just a week where I'm eager to read more comics when this comes out, I may pick up the second issue or I may not. But I did, here I'm going to spoil just for a second the very last page. I did like seeing Lucifer show up at the end. And this is a different looking Lucifer, and perhaps a Lucifer with a different attitude than we're used to from the Neil Gaiman universe Lucifer, perhaps. I'm not sure. I'm not sure what the relationship of the Hellblazer of this story is to the Neil Gaiman Sandman universe, because my understanding is the other Hellblazer, current Hellblazer storyline is part of the Neil Gaiman Sandman universe. Anyway, it was not a bad comic. I just thought I was going to be more blown away by it than I was. In writing art and color. Okay, great art and color in Firepower by two of the very best in their area right now, in my opinion, Chris Samney and Matt Wilson. But Robert Kirkman is not impressing me as much here with this story as he did in Oblivion Song. 3 issues into Oblivion Song, I thought it was a much cooler story. And here it still feels kind of standard. We've got a married couple, one who's a woman, the wife is a cop, and the husband is an mystical kung fu master. And so a big part of the plot this time around is they need to train their children to do self-defense because the forces of their past, or his past anyway, seem to be coming back to get them. And we get a little scene of her being kind of super cop, and there's a lot of cute stuff there. And I don't know. My view of cops lately has changed a bit, so that's also kind of weird. There's 2 Image comics now with kind of women who kind of have this cops are just cute, cuddly people kind of thing, and with all the protests and police brutality issues going on, it seems kind of out of tune with the times in a way. But I did enjoy the art a lot, and I'm just sticking with this. I'm assuming Robert Kirkman has some interesting twists and turns coming up. It just doesn't feel like they're there yet, and he's maybe taking too much of his time. And I own but have not read the prequel graphic novel, so maybe that would change my whole view on all of this. But it's really just inching forward very slowly. So that was number 7. No, sorry, that was number 8. Hellblazer was number 9. That was number 8. In at number 7 is something from the Sandman universe, The Dreaming Waking Hours, written by the sometimes great writer G. Willow Wilson. I absolutely loved issue number 1, so I came in with almost as much excitement for this as I did for the We Only Find Them When We're Dead, because of how much I was surprised by how much I enjoyed the previous issue and the art and color. And it's still really good art and color by the team of Nick Robles and Matt Lopes, I don't know. And it's still got some fun stuff about she's trapped in a dream with all the different theoretical versions of who actually wrote Shakespeare's plays, and that's kind of cute. I don't think it was as well put forward. I think I have some idea of some of the theories about who wrote Shakespeare's plays, but I don't know them all, and I don't feel like Willow Wilson helped me understand what all this was. I had to fill in a lot of gaps that she was leaving for me in ways that I found difficult. Got more really cool art. So, it just kind of rests in the middle of my pile here at number 7 because the first issue just really clicked with me, and it just didn't click quite as much. And there's a thing where some writers, to me, feel like they expect me to understand them in a way that I don't understand them, and that they're not giving me enough. And I'm starting to suspect that might be a problem with this, The Dreaming Waking Hours. But hopefully I'm wrong, and hopefully another issue or 2 and everything will really be clicking again. And I don't know how long this is expected to last. I haven't seen whether it's a miniseries or not. But it also has a thing that, now, and I swear, 4 or 5 years ago, you almost never saw the F word in comics, particularly in a Vertigo comic or something like that. Now it just seemed an indicator of being cool that you're saying the F word. And I don't know, it struck a jarring note for me. But again, I'm too old. The world's passing me by, I guess. Here's a really interesting comic that that had art I love, and I bought it for a large part because of the artist Tommy Lee Edwards. And I guess maybe he does his own coloring. And I had not heard of the writer, Jeff McComsey. McComsey? It's called Grendel, Kentucky. And I would not, despite the name Grendel, I would not have known from reading this that it is a modern remake of the story of Beowulf if they hadn't told me in the back matter. And so there was a lot of stuff going on here with very minimalistic writing, a lot of images and very minimalistic writing. And to me, it was not enough to really tell the story. The significance of things did not click. The elements are kind of cool as I kind of started to realize what all the elements were by the end of the story, that there's this, someone has died who perhaps is more part of the outlaw culture in this Kentucky town, I guess. I kind of had to, and a bunch of his children or people who he mentored are all sad about his death, and one of them is the leader of this all-female bikers gang. Are there such things? And so here's their gathering, I guess, at his funeral, his wake, or just a memorial for him. But it wasn't that clear to me. Maybe, again, I was being the clueless old guy. But, man, this is great art. And so I have this on my pull list. I'll just let it ride. It's 4 issues. But, again, I kind of feel like the writer expects me to understand his intentions. In the last case, it was her intentions. In this one, it's his intentions. Or these writers expect me to follow what they're doing more without telling me enough. So I'm guessing there's a Grendel-like monster that we will be facing in the next issue. And I guess the female leader of the bicycle gang is the Beowulf stand-in. I only know that from reading this back matter. So it's a really interesting concept. Tommy Lee Edwards is an artist that gives me great pleasure, and so it's great to see him doing it, something unusual and independent. There was some Batman stuff he did briefly that I really loved too. I'd love to see him back on Batman. Let's see. Yeah, he must have done the colors because it just says illustrated by Tommy Lee Edwards. And the colors are really nice, very reminiscent of names again. Whenever I'm got on camera, the guy who does all the colors for Mike Mignola and other people, and I'll think Dave Stewart. I'll think the colors were reminiscent of Dave Stewart. So this was really wonderful comic book making, except maybe in the scripting. This one I rank higher, but in really the art wasn't as good, and it's hard to tell for sure what the story is at this point. Part of the problem is this is Bang number 3. I think Bang number 2 must have come out 5 or 6 months ago. Dark Horse, for whatever reason, did not start up their single issues as quickly as everyone else did after the Diamond shutdown happened. So unfortunately for single issue readers, there's a huge gap. I remember that in the previous 2 issues of Bang, there were different characters out of imaginary pulp novels who were coming together in some way, and there was talk about some author who was obviously very much like Philip K. Dick, who was writing the novels about them, and they were looking for him. And so I guess all of this hooks up with that, and it's got kind of a cool idea of a female character from some pulp novels who's a genius, who is actually a paraplegic, but has created a super suit that allows her to go out and do kind of spy missions, and she's fighting against something called Gold Maze. And at the end, I think the person who shows up at the end might have been a character from one of the previous issues, and he talks about how they're both characters from a novel in some sense, and but I can't fully remember how it all ties together. I think the coloring is very nice. I feel the art is just okay, which is unfortunate because I remember in other comics really liking Wilfredo Torres, but I don't know. I think it's okay, probably digitally drawn art with a lot of figures reused in different panels. And anyway, especially compared to the Tommy Lee Edwards. But something about this whole sort of Philip K. Dick and characters from pulp novels and meeting and possibly in real life or what have you, I'm just very intrigued, and I'm very excited to see where Matt Kindt, the writer of this, is going. And it's kind of in my wheelhouse, even though it's maybe not a perfectly done comic. But maybe in terms of the writing, maybe it will all fit together, and so I probably need to go back and read it. So that came in at number 5. In at number 4 is Strange Adventures. And this was a good issue, but maybe it didn't feel as strong as previous issues to me. I'm complaining about everything. I love the art in here. I can't always tell when it's Mitch Gerads and when it is Evan Shaner. And I love the use of big panels and everything. It's kind of reminiscent of Darwin Cook type of artwork. Or not the artwork itself, but layouts and stuff. And but I'll have to say, and it's unfair, I suppose, comparing Tom King's other sort of standout books being The Vision and Mr. Miracle, but both of which were about families in a way, or couples, and this is about a couple, and it's about a war, and it's about potential war crimes. But I'm not clicking with this couple the way I've clicked with the family in The Vision, and the way I clicked with Mr. Miracle and Big Barda. I'm not sure what it is. I feel like Tom King's holding something back about what makes this couple work and what their relationship is based on. And maybe that's just not what he's interested in here. He's interested in the layers of story and perception of the struggles of war and who's right and who's wrong and that kind of thing. Or that you can never tell who's right or who's wrong in the fog of war, I guess. So anyway, I enjoyed it, but again, just like everything else, I just thought it would be a little better than it actually was. This is definitely my cover of the week. I love this cover. I love the colors. I love the layout of it. I think this is the Mitch Gerads cover. They also have an Evan Shaner cover. If I wanted to spend my money foolishly, I would get both covers of Strange Adventures because they're both such cool artists. And I like the way they did a back cover there. I think the first few issues had ads. Oh no, this does have ads too. Was there some of these issues did not have ads, I think, and some did. Anyway, enjoyable special miniseries from DC. So several of those in my lower ranks maybe deserve to be higher, and I'm not sure, in a more rational person might not have put the ones I'm going to put in my top 3 in my top 3. But in at number 3 is a brand new comic from Image called Inkblot. And I don't know if Emma Kubert is any relation to Joe Kubert. I'm wondering if she's his granddaughter or something. She's the writer of this. Or I think that the two people, Emma Kubert and Rusty Glad, are just collaborators. And we're not told who's done what. I think maybe they both did the story, and Emma is the penciler and Rusty the inker. I think there was some explanation in the back here. Yeah, I've just now forgotten what I read about it. So this could be viewed as kind of a kid's fantasy story. I read it out loud with my daughter. It wasn't, the characters are not kids or anything, but perhaps the slightly whimsical and mythological nature of it could make it kind of a kid's fantasy story, or it's one of those things that maybe straddles the divide between adult fantasy and children's fantasy. But they're kind of these mythical family who seems to live for a very long time because of their hunting down of magical creatures and places. And so now they've been living for thousands of years, and our protagonist is the kind of scribe bookworm of the family, and this magical cat appears that may have been made out of magical ink and leads her into an adventure. I'm not describing it very well, but it's very charming. If you like something that kind of combines otherworldly fantasy with a sense of fable, this is very promising. It's just the first issue, so I don't want to totally oversell it, but I really had a good time reading it. And as I said, I read it out loud with my daughter, and since it worked for both of us, that of course way elevated it, in my opinion. It's exactly 20 pages of story, and it's a very thin comic. They didn't add any ads or a whole lot of the back matter is just on the back page. So it's a very thin feeling comic for $3.99. And given that it's kind of kid friendly, maybe it would have been nice if it was $2.99 or something. But anyway, I'm really looking forward to seeing where this goes and seeing if it maintains the high level of really fun fantasy. I picked this out with my daughter when we read the description in previews 2 months ago and added it to our pull list. Okay, then in at number 2, it's kind of exciting because I finally caught up with all my Batman reading. I got way behind when I missed issue 89 because it sold out, and then I put Batman on my pull list, and it took... Anyway, then I got way behind, and it just took me a long time to catch up. And I'm really enjoying James Tynion's yet another Joker Gotham apocalypse story. And maybe it helped that I hadn't been reading it for a while, and then when I got to it, because in a way we've seen all this before, and it's just James Tynion's version of the Joker destroys Gotham and Batman is beaten to his knees and is trying to make a comeback. But it's very cool, and it's got great art, great coloring, and I think my big complaint is it's stretched out, and it's stretched out in a good way, in a sense. I mean, he keeps the balls in the air as he stretches out the story and makes it last many issues, and so it's kind of delicious in that way. But the flip side of it is I find with the story stretched out over so many issues, because this is Joker War Part 4, but really it's a continuation of the story that started with the whole designer story, which goes back maybe another 4 issues before that or so. But so what happens is I start questioning the logic behind it. So my stupid brain, I'm reading this story and I'm thinking, well, wait a minute. How can the Joker have just transferred all of Bruce Wayne's money, his entire fortune, and all the companies he owns into the Joker's name? And does money transfer that easily? I mean, if you want to give someone a gift of more than $15,000, you have to pay like a 50% gift tax. You can't just transfer everything over to someone else. I mean, that's silly of me to worry about, what the government and the IRS was thinking about this, but that's just kind of an example of how, with this long stretched out story, I kind of start questioning the logic behind it all. But there's lots of cool elements. I like the clown killer that's popped up. For the first time in a long time, I'm kind of enjoying a story with a lot of Harley Quinn in it. I don't like the character Punchline. I don't find her very impressive. But still, it's kind of will be fun to see Harley Quinn punch her out or something along those lines. So, looking forward to reading more Batman. James Tynion has just developed into a really good writer who knows how to make these kind of dark, apocalyptic, but not to be totally taken seriously stories a lot of fun to read. I mean, just as he did in Justice League Dark. Although I think I like his Justice League Dark even more, maybe because of the characters involved and the situations involved. But that also was a super stretched out story, which he managed to make fun to read anyway. But I do think in the long run, I just wish, as my caveat, I do wish Batman could return to being kind of one man on the streets, kind of almost secretly fighting crime and solving mysteries, rather than these giant apocalypses, that envelop the whole city. Because who would stay in this city? There's no way. And, in this day and age, you certainly would imagine the government sending in someone. Although another thing I thought, with the political rhetoric right now, to the Fox News far-right Republicans, the Joker is like the crazy Democrats taking over. And to the left and the Democrats on watching MSNBC, the Joker is like Donald Trump, stripping everything of all meaning and caring about nothing but himself. But anyway, that thought passed through my head. Finally, number 1 out of 12 for the week was Usagi Yojimbo, number 12. This is called The Return, part 2 of 4. So unlike most Usagi Yojimbo, I think my caveat on this, it was a great story. I would not start your Usagi Yojimbo reading with The Return. I feel like it has more power I haven't read a lot of Usagi, I've read all 12 issues leading up to this return, and I think it has more power because of the amount that I already know about Usagi and what I know about, sounds weird to say, but what I know about Usagi Yojimbo as a person. It feels like a lot has built. It has this story where I don't even know how to describe the story per se, but there's an evil group or a group of samurai who are going to sacrifice the village where he grew up for their sort of suicide mission, political ambitions. Even though Usagi might, in some degree, agree with their politics, he doesn't agree with the means to the end. The means they want to do to get their ends. So knowing his character from previous knowledge, I think, adds to the weight of this story. But that said, given that you do have a little bit of a sense of Usagi, then you could go to the issue prior to this, the beginning of this series, or this mini story. But I would recommend, if you can, read all of the ones in this color series. But it feels of like a very tense, emotionally tangled up story, reading it with the amount of Usagi background I have. For people who've been reading, dozens of years worth of Usagi or scores of years worth of Usagi stories, I assume it would be that more powerful, or maybe I think it's the first time in the whole series that he's returned to the village where he grew up. So anyway, it's a wonderful comic, a unique comic, and as far as I can tell, within my limited reading of Usagi, a unique story for Usagi. So it's amazing that Stan Sakai has kept this going so long, and as best I can tell, like from reading some of the classic ones that they've started to reprint, been improving his craft, especially his craft of subtle storytelling the whole time. So Usagi Yojimbo, very high regards for that. So really the only comic I didn't have some kind of complaints about this week. Wow, I've gone 40 minutes talking about 12 comics. I keep thinking... Anyway, there you are. That's how I seem to do it. If you've made it to the end and seen my whole list here, I thank you very much for taking the time out. I know there are too many comic book channels on YouTube now, and it'd be nice if all of us did shorter videos. So I'm going to keep whacking myself in the head and trying to make myself do shorter ones here and there. Good night, all.